help me give a very warm welcome to the stage, Harlem Siddles.
All right. He asked me what was my walk-up music, and I was like, man, Earth, Wind, and Fire. I'm a child of the 80s. I came of age in the 80s, and actually that record was one of the first records that I bought. Actually, my mom got me a stereo. Yeah, that's a whole other thing. We won't get into that. So I am really honored to be here this morning and to talk to you all about my journey and the importance about the power of collective action, community, and storytelling in education. So let's just go ahead and get right to it. There we go. So one of the things I like to do is check to see that we're using the same words to talk about the same things. And so as a little experiment, I asked AI, why do stories matter? And here's what some things that AI came up with. Empathy. Stories can help us understand and empathize with others, even if we don't know them personally. Learning. Stories can teach us about the world and ourselves and help us learn from others' experiences. Perspective. Stories can provide windows into different cultures and time periods and help us understand different perspectives. Thank you, AI. I appreciate that. And then I asked myself, that's me, in Houston, Texas, where I was born, I asked myself, why does my story matter? And I think this is important. So I believe that one of the biggest challenges that we face personally is reconciling who we are or who we think we are with who we actually are. That's the essence of our human journey, our struggle, so to speak. And no matter who you are, how much or how little you have, you're gonna struggle. That's just a part of being a human being. So, man, I gotta do lots of clicks here. It's like 4 clicks per. Anyway, as I revisit my story, I'm able to see patterns and pivotal moments in time with more clarity that hopefully lead to better decisions. I don't know, you need to ask my wife about the better decisions part. And by sharing my story, my hope is to create space, okay, for others to share and build community and thrive. And I'm glad I got the thrive word in there. That seems to be we didn't even pre-plan that, it just happened. So, keep clicking. So let's dive into my story. Here I am with my mom and my dad in Austin, Texas in the 70s. I was actually born in Houston. My parents, graduates of Prairie View A&M University. My dad studied education. He was a basketball player. They got married. They met when they were 18, got married, and then they had me when they were 19, still in college. And I guess it might add some insight. My dad was from 5th Ward in Houston. Some people know that as the ghetto. But my dad he didn't grow up with a lot of money, and his family was fractured. So much so, he would talk about when he would go home from school in 5th Ward, he would walk past his house because he was ashamed and wait until all of his friends came into his house, came to their houses, then he'd go back to his house. So, And I also want to think this is a pivotal time because they graduated from college right as integration was starting. So they were the first ones to really benefit from, quote, affirmative action. And my dad came to Austin to earn his PhD in psychology. An interesting story about that is that when my dad applied, the department had a special meeting where only he was the only visitor. And he had to justify to them why they should let him in to school. And I ended up going to UT, and I was excited about that. And I thought my dad, yeah, I'm a legacy. And my dad was always ambivalent about that, about UT, about Austin. And I didn't really understand. And I guess this is the whole thing about stories is that as time goes on, you look back, go, oh, okay, I get it. I understand. So I attended a local middle school. I put the middle school in here, but I said, I ain't trying to throw nobody under the bus. Yes, it was like 50 years ago, but people are tender. But I went to this school. I went to this school, and I guess I was in first grade at this time. And during recess, every kid looks forward to recess, right? So it's during recess, but I had trouble pronouncing TH words, the, and CL. So I'd have to get with the resource teacher and with the note cards, right? And they would have me practice while the other kids were at recess. And then finally, one day, man, I got to go to recess. All right, that's good. And so they had me skip. But I don't know, I wasn't a good skipper. I didn't skip properly. I didn't get the skip rule book on skipping and the importance of skipping. And remember, I'm 6 years old, right? So I'm just trying to play. And what resulted from that is that they met with my parents and they said, I should be in special education. Because they thought they had diagnosed a learning issue. Well, thankfully, through the collective action of my parents, that did not happen. And I guess I point out this to say how many of the kids that we work with at these pivotal times when we're diagnosing who they are and where they should go, who is stepping in and intervening for them and advocating for them. That's extremely important. So my dad got his PhD from UT, became a clinical psychologist, joined the Army. We moved to Tacoma, Washington for a little while I was in junior high. I was on the football team. I was in the band, and I loved music and sports. So I was going to high school, and actually it's funny because when I was in junior high, I was in the band, but the orchestra director had me sing Fiddler on the Roof, If I Were a Rich Man. Yeah. That was me at the family reunion. You get up, that's the one thing you did all year, like that was creative, and so I get up there, diddle, 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 digga, digga, digga. Anyway. But I noticed, okay, I was a trombone player, nobody cared, but I sang, and they're like, oh, I got all this attention, so I need to be in choir. So I got in the choir, and I played football. And I went to Judson High School. Some of you may have heard of Judson. I'm dating myself, but I was on the first team to win the state championship at Judson High School. Long time ago. I was captain of the football team and president of the choir. which is pretty cool. And I think to this day, I'm the first, if not the only person to be an all-state tenor and a tackle in the state of Texas. So I was in advanced placement classes. So I guess that special ed thing didn't work out quite like it was supposed to. And I was short. I'm 5'8 3/4, but I say 5'9". It's too short to be pursued by the major colleges, which was heartbreaking for me at the time. And now both my knees are bad and I need a new hip, and I'm kind of thankful because Lord knows where I would be if I did continue to play at that time. And I ended up going to college on an academic scholarship. And yes, I'm bragging. But I say all of this because even though I had accomplished all of these things that look as though I was doing all the right things, I didn't necessarily feel that way. I didn't necessarily feel seen. Okay? And when I came to college here at UT, this is in the 80s. Just like it is now, there's 50,000 students at the University of Texas. Fewer black people then than there are now. And I was studying music. So I think there was maybe 4 of us in the entire music department. And the culture shock of being a football player and a jock, which was a little misogynistic and homophobic. And then realizing that, wow, I'm surrounded by folks that have different perspectives than I do. And I had to grow up, right? Because I had to learn the impact of my words and actions on other people. And that was not an easy thing to learn. And I just want to say, thank God there was no social media back then, because I probably would not be on this stage. But I attended school, and I'm a second generation college student, but I felt, and my parents moved to Japan. So they were in San Antonio, which is an hour away, right? And I'm like, okay, I can go home, get that home cooking, right? I was a mama's boy. I ain't scared. So I went from that to, oh, they're literally on the other side of the world. Wow. And again, this is looking back, because I had all these things, right? I was all these things, and yet I was adrift. I did not have an anchor. I didn't have a community that I felt like I could really belong to at the University of Texas, because I wasn't black enough to be with the black folks, because I was always the one black kid in the class, and I was too black to be a UT. And so it's an isolating feeling. And a lot of our students feel that. I study music. Now, I liked Earth, Wind, and Fire and Prince and Michael Jackson. My option was I could be an opera singer. That's it. Those are my options. And they literally called the music that I was into was not legit. It was illegitimate. That's how they referred to it. And contributed more to me being angry, right? I had these privileges, but then I was mad at my parents. Why didn't I have a piano, Mom? Why'd you go and get all that education, Dad? Take me away from black people. And then I get around black people, I'll be scared. My dad actually, he took me to Fifth Ward one time when I was 7 or 8 years old, and I played basketball, pickup basketball with this young man on the court, and he whipped my ass. I just tell you, he demolished me. Like, he was in a whole other realm of basketball that I had not seen before. That's an aside. Anyway, so I studied music, and I really started to find redemption in the blues and the power of myths. This gentleman here, this gentleman by the name of T.D. Bell, and I have lots of firsts in my life. T.D. Bell was the first electric blues guitar player in Austin. He is the father of blues in Austin. All of the cats, W.C. Clark was in his band. W.C. Clark is the guy who supposedly showed Stevie Ray Vaughan, who's got a statue, right? Showed him how to play the blues. I found out that Austin used to have this thriving scene of black music and arts. And I guess the blues is the quintessential American thing because it's a contradiction. It's sad and happy. If you know about music, it's major and minor at the same time. You're playing in between the cracks. And I discovered that the blues emanated out of field hollers that the slaves used to do. And the reason it became field hollers is because they were forbidden from playing the drums. People like Latin music, salsa, merengue, it's all African stuff. Because when people were brought, the over 90% of the people taken from Africa didn't end up here in North America. They end up in the Caribbean and South America. So you have these rituals, stories, all these things that have been preserved in these different cultures. And I didn't know this. And it blew my mind. I started to think about that metaphor here in the United States. We didn't have the drums, so we invented the blues. Now, people have talked about the field hollers. They used to do wade in the water, call and response. Well, a lot of times they may be giving instructions about how people can escape to freedom. It was coded, right? And so that was a revelation for me, and I started to think about the myth of Orpheus. Anybody familiar with the myth of Orpheus? Orpheus, he was the god of song. He could make the trees weep and the sun come up with his song. And he had his goddess of beauty, and depending on the version of the myth, Eurydice, she was taken by Hades down into the underworld. And Orpheus, he goes down, he meets the three-headed dog, Cerberus. He talks Cerberus into letting him in, and he's talking to Hades, and Hades says, hey, you need to trust me, brother. What I want you to do, I want you to turn around. Don't look back and walk out of here. And trust that she follows you. And so Orpheus is a great Greek myth, tragedy, which I also started to understand that all the Greek myths were originally African myths. You see what I'm saying here? And so the tragedy of Orpheus is that he looks back, and of course he loses her. And I started to think about the blues and this idea of Robert Johnson is really the foundation of the blues. And they would say that he had this myth about him going down to the crossroads and making some type of deal with the devil. And that's why he was able to get so much power. And I started to think about Orpheus was really running away from his history. Because I was also a science teacher. and I was teaching geology. And I started to think about when you go into layers of sediment, and you look at the fossil record, the lower you go further back in time. And so that became a metaphor for me. And that started me on a journey. So, see what I'm doing on time here. We're good. You trying to make me speed up? I got 30 minutes here. I'm halfway. We good. So from there, I graduate. My first job is teaching second grade reading and math in a Title I school in Killeen. And then I taught sixth grade science and social studies here in Austin at Mendez Middle School. And of course, seeing me and knowing my pedigree, so to speak, they wanted me to coach football. And I just didn't think that there was really a need for another football coach. So actually, I coached the Science Olympiad team. And then I took Blue Orpheus and I made it an interdisciplinary unit and turned it into Kid Orpheus as a way to teach the students about their history, their culture, their music. And actually, Eurydice from Kid Orpheus ended up going to Harvard and is now a millionaire. And she helps people get into Ivy League schools all over the world. And again, this is another pivotal moment for me in finding my path. And while I was there, I started this arts and technology-based after-school program. And so that was kind of my foray and start getting into technology. And I started developing educational content, became the audio director at a software company. I wrote and produced music, oversaw voiceover and sign design production. And I realized that I had a knack for doing production. And then it's the early 2000s, we all got laid off. And I wanted to stay in that world of advertising. So I was like, or stay in that world of production. And that's when I, quote, discovered advertising. And I guess the thing about it is, if I had all this relative privilege, how did I not know that I could be creative and make a living at anything other than being a musician until I turned 30 years old? Because there was a lack of exposure. So when I tried to make that transition, my portfolio wasn't advertising, it was education. My relationships weren't advertising, it was education. So it was very, very difficult for me to do that. And so I started to think about my story as a second generation college graduate. How did it take me that long to discover that these other careers existed? How would the potential first generation college students that I work with, how would they know? And then if they did know, how would they actually go about pursuing that? And I was at another pivotal point in my life. I was working at an educational software company as a producer, and they were closing. And I was turning 40. I was in my midlife crisis. So I decided, and I was single, so I moved home. And I started couch surfing on the road to start what would become E for Youth. So I always say I knew enough to get started, but that's about all I knew. And so I struggled in fits and starts. There were so many names. It was the Media Communications Council. I had a site called Media Experiments, then became the Media Communications Council, and then finally we landed on E for Youth. But I would always ask the students, so what do you like to do? What are you interested in? And many times they couldn't tell me. As a matter of fact, they would look dazed like nobody had ever asked them what you like to do. What are you interested in? And that was a huge problem. And so what I started to perceive or see is that we don't ask students. We prescribe things, but we don't consult. with them to figure out who they are and what's going to help move them forward. And so I want to create an org that bridges the gap between their aspirations and their opportunities. So they said they like video games and movies. And that's the thing, is that I went through this not saying, hey, I'm going to do this. I said, who am I dealing with? What might help them? And that's how I came up with the solutions that we have now. So I started booking tours. And eventually, I landed on this theory of change. We believe that creative youth, particularly those from underserved communities, are a drastically underutilized resource. We work with partners to invest cultural capital in these communities and deliver impact in the following ways: employability skills, exposure to high growth careers, extending out of school time, and employment opportunities with hands-on learning with peers, near peers, and professionals. Those are the four main things that we do. All of our programs need to be doing one or more of those things. And those of you that know about a logic model, the outputs, the outcomes, that's how that way we don't have to reslice and dice everything for different funders and all that type of stuff. This is what we do at its core. And so I want to take a moment to talk about what is cultural capital. Cultural capital is a term that was coined by a French sociologist, Pierre Bourdieu. And essentially it says the sum of our relationships and our experiences really equate to our chances of success. And so what I really started to think about, how do I help students have experiences and develop relationships where they can thrive? So E3U's role is to position BIPOC youth for success in the ecosystem. We develop curriculum, tools, and support that allow students to go through their own personal asset mapping process and accelerate their growth. As they learn these skills, they earn employment by coaching, mentoring their peers and near peers, and creating content that helps the community members feel seen and heard. And you'll hear us say this a bunch. We engage, empower, educate, and employ. Keep clicking. So the vision, and Richard hit upon this, that it takes years to really form something. So we're starting slow so that we can move fast. We are building a pipeline of 10,000 K through 24 youth that, number one, embrace their stories. That means you got to know your story first. Embrace their stories and have the digital skills needed to thrive in cities across the world. And we're starting right here in Austin. And our mission, again, is to engage, empower, educate, and employ, in that order, youth of color and equitable future demands by ensuring that they are seen, heard, and hired. And I want to make a distinction between being seen and heard versus feeling seen and heard. Because we can think that we're addressing something for a student or a person, but that doesn't mean that we're actually hitting the mark. So how do we do this? At the center of this, we have a Creative Leadership Academy, which is for people that are 18 and up. They are the nucleus of what we do. And they're the ones that really help us build this pipeline. They're the fulcrum. They work with corporations where people are coaching, training, and hiring them to do regular work, and it's employee engagement for those corporations. They work with the senior communities to capture their oral histories and showcase those on our website, whatoncewas.org, and through events. They go and work with K through 8 students and do workshops so students can learn about the culture of the city and also learn to use these same tools to tell their own stories. And those K through 8 students create a pipeline that then goes into our high schools. And we work with high school students to give them career exposure and help them, now that they've identified the things they like to do, how do you leverage those things to create a digital portfolio that's going to take you where you want to go. And then they're back into the Creative Leadership Academy or onto college or onto careers, and boom. That's how we do that. So with a core group of 20 folks in the Leadership Academy, we served 500 students last year. Our goal in the next 3 to 5 years is to have 300 people. 300 18 and up youth, and that's how we're going to be able to reach 10,000. And we're not saying, and we're a supplement. We're not here to replace anybody. So we're saying we're going to help train these people up, and they can go work at Boys and Girls Club or Creative Action. The idea is, how do we boost the cultural competency of the entire ecosystem? That is what we're talking about. And how do we measure across the entire ecosystem to be able to see that we are making progress? Wrapping it up here. Thank you for your patience. So, what once was a storytelling platform, it's a location mixed reality story platform. We use it to build community, to facilitate in-person and remote tours. Why? And I touched on this. It allows these communities to tell our own stories. Our college-age youth are being employed in upskilling. Younger students get to learn about the culture. And the folks that are new to Austin, that are really impacting the cost of living, are also getting historical context and thinking about ways they can interact with these people in a more equitable way. So, getting close to the end. So we have some events coming up. On October 5th, we've been working with this neighborhood, the first neighborhood in Austin that was planned and built by Black professionals, some of the original Tuskegee Airmen, presidents at Houston and Tillotson College, when they were separate, lived there. So we've been capturing oral histories and creating these immersive stories. And we're actually going to be launching this project in October. Feel free to scan that QR code if you'd like to find out more information or get tickets. And we've got our staff here. They can give you more information about that as well. So we also are working with the Housing Authority for so Rosewood Courts was the first, a lot of firsts, was the first public housing for Black folks in the United States. And the land was taken through eminent domain. It used to be Emancipation Park, was where some of the first Juneteenth celebrations took place. So they've leveled Rosewood Courts and they're rebuilding it. We're reopening Emancipation Park, and our headquarters will be there, and we'll have an indoor space as well. So this Heritage Center is going to have a genealogy center, be able to do research, workshops, curriculum, community events. And so what I started to realize as I look back on my journey is that these themes keep coming back over and over again. Is culture matters. Stories are a way to be able to share with people that we have to be vulnerable in order to help our students see that they can be vulnerable. So, as I close, something to think about. What are some pivotal moments in your own journey that made you decide to dedicate so much of your life to helping others? And what type of collective actions are you willing to take to build community and ensure that the young people you serve feel seen and heard? That's all I got today, folks. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you. Please come and check out our workshop with our fantastic staff. And we are going to be providing workshops in schools. And so if you're interested, talk to our staff. You can also scan the QR code to give us some, to sign up and get some additional feedback. Thank you.